This is the file. You can find it on my Patreon page. You can download it for free and modify the values. But I would really recommend you follow this video and understand how it's done. I will now start in the part design workbench and I will first click on this button, which is create a new body. Now let's create a sketch which will be the shape that we are making. In order to do that, click on the create sketch button. I will make a sketch of the top projection of the street sign, so the XY plane is the one that I'm going to draw in. Let's click on the OK button. FreeCAD automatically moved to the sketcher workbench, you can see it here. And now I want to draw a rectangle with rounded corners. Here in the drawing group I have a create rectangle button and a little arrow next to it, which I'm going to click and select rounded rectangle. Now let's first click somewhere in the view, then click somewhere else, then click again to set a radius. And now after creating the rectangle, let's give it dimensions. The first thing that I'm going to do is select this point here, which represents the corner of the rectangle and the origin. After selecting them, I will click on this button, coincident constraint, which means these 2 points will always be one on top of each other. You can see the rectangle has moved and is now starting from the Y and the X axis. All these rounded corners have the exact same radius, so if I want to set the radius for the corners, I can do it by selecting only one of the corners, going here on the toolbar, click on the little arrow, and here I have constraint radius or diameter. I'm going to use radius. If you're into FreeCAD, here is a little tip. You have some letters written next to each of these toolbar options. Those are the shortcuts. So instead of going here, clicking on the little arrow and selecting constraint radius, you have KR, which means first press K, release it, and then press the R key. It will do the exact same thing, create a radius constraint. After selecting the option, I will have a pop-up window where I can write the actual value. I'm going to use a radius of 4 millimeters. And now the rectangle has very nice corners with a radius of 4 millimeters. In order to have a perfectly determined rectangle, I will select one of the highest points. We can see it here on this line. So click on it and set a vertical distance constraint. Again, I can set it from this menu, but this time I'm going to press the I key, which does the exact same thing, opens the pop-up and sets a vertical distance constraint. I will use a length of 180 millimeters, and now the height of the rectangle is perfectly determined. I still need to set its length, so select one of the points here and press L this time for a horizontal distance constraint, and I will use a value of 450 millimeters. Press enter, and now you can see the entire sketch, the entire drawing is green. You can also see here it is fully constrained, which means I cannot modify anything by dragging things around unless I change these values. This is the ideal thing to get whenever creating sketches in FreeCAD, to have them fully constrained and only modify them by changing dimensions. Let's close this sketch. Let's turn it into a 3D object, make sure it is selected and click on this button, which is pad. The default length for the pad is 10 millimeters, but I don't want that. I only want 3 millimeters because that is the thickness of the material that I'm milling today. Write 3 here, and I don't need to modify anything else. Just click on the OK button and I have a 3D object which represents a piece of material that I will end up with. Let's go back to the object and create the line at the center. I need to create a new sketch, but I'm not going to use the button directly because I want the sketch to always stay on this face of the object. So before selecting the option to create a new sketch, I will click on this face. Now click on the create sketch button and let's start making the slot. I have an option here, create slot. Click first here, then move to the left. Try to hold the mouse almost horizontal with the object. You can see here next to the mouse pointer I have a horizontal line. This means a horizontal constraint between these 2 points will automatically be added. And after making the second click, I need to make a third one in order to get the radius. And now let's select this arc here, press KR for radius constraint. Remember, you can anytime select it from the menu here, but it's much faster using the keyboard shortcuts. And let's set a radius of 2 millimeters, which will result in a slot of 4 millimeters. Press enter, and I need to set a few things, which is the overall length of the slot and the positioning by setting the distance from the origin. Let's zoom in a little bit, select this point, zoom out, zoom in here at the other end, and select this point. To set a horizontal distance constraint, press the L key. And I will set a value of 420 millimeters. Zoom in, select the first point. If you select 2 points, you can set the distance between those 2 points. If you only select 1 point, the default behavior of FreeCAD is setting the distance from that point to the origin. So select just this point, press L, and now I will set the distance from the origin to this point, which should be 15 millimeters. One more thing that I need to do is set the vertical distance. Again, select this point. Now I will press the I key or select it from this menu. Constrain vertical distance. You can see here the shortcut I. And let's set a value of 65 millimeters. Press enter. And now the sketch is green. You can see it fully constrained here in the solver messages group. I can close it. And now let's create a new pocket. And let's give it a value of 1.5 millimeters, half of the total thickness of the object. I don't need to change anything else. Click on the OK button. And I have the slot exactly as I want. You can see it's cut, but only to the half of the thickness of the material. Now let's get to the most difficult part for some of you, adding the text, selecting the font, positioning it. In order to create text, I'm going to move to the draft workbench. Let's first create the number, which will be placed here at the top, and then we will use the same method to create the street name. In order to create a text in FreeCAD, I'm not going to use this button, the A, which is the text command. This is something completely different, and it is not useful for what we want to do. In order to create text that I can use to make cutouts in the object, I need to go to the draft creation toolbar, and if it doesn't fit, you can see if I move it here, you have all the options, but if they don't fit, I have this little arrow here which will expand it and I can find all the options. The one that I'm looking for is this S icon, which is shape from text. So remember, if you want to create text and use it in your 3D models, don't use the text option but shape from text. After clicking on that button, you can see that I have some XYZ positioning options. I just create the text with whatever value is here. You can see that if I move the mouse, those values change. I don't care about them. What I care is the string, the height, and the font file. Let's first change the string, so it's 91B. I will use a height of 60 millimeters. And here is the tricky part in FreeCAD. You cannot select the font just as in any other program by having a drop-down with all the fonts installed in the system. Instead of that, you have to locate the file that represents the font. Let's click on these 3 little dots, and I'm already in the downloads folder. I've downloaded a certain font. Let's use the bold version. Click on the open button. Now I can click on the OK button and the text is somewhere random, just as I've told you. I haven't changed those values. I need to do 2 things to have it on this face of the object so I can use it to make another pocket. The first thing is click on it in the tree and move it over the body. This way it will be part of the body so I can use it for pockets. So let's move this text on this face. I can do that by going to Base, Placement, and Position, changing the X, Y, and Z values. And this is okay. You can see that changing the X value will move it. But before doing that, I want to make another thing, because if I want this text to be on top of this face, I will have to use a Z value of 3 millimeters. But what if later I have a different material, I go to the pad, the thickness, the overall thickness of the object, and I'm using, let's say, a 5 millimeters thick object. I will have to go back to the shape string, change the Z value, and I don't want that. In order to have this text always on this face, no matter how thick, how thin the object is, I have to select it, go to map mode, which by default is deactivated, click on it, then click on the 3 little dots, and select the face. Now you can see that the object has moved in the bottom corner of this face. Let's click on the OK button and now go back to shape string and change the position again by modifying the X and the Y. This time I don't need to modify the Z because it will always be on this face. So how can I place this text in the position that I want? If an object is attached to something, a sketch, a shape string, doesn't really matter. Instead of going to placement, you have to go to attachment offset where you have the exact same options just as in placement. So let's go to position. Let's change the X value and modify it by scrolling the wheel mouse or by entering a value by hand. You can see that the value increments by 1 millimeter. If you want to move faster, hold the control button and scroll. It will grow with 10 millimeters each time your wheel mouse scrolls. Now let's move it upwards. Let's go to the Y value, again in the attachment offset, not in placement. Because the shape string is attached to this face, let's increase the Y value. Now it is positioned almost exactly where I want, but I want it to be larger. I want it to feel better, this space. I can either double click on the object and change the height from 60, let's try 70. Or if I don't want to double click on it and go to that menu, I can anytime modify any value for any type of object in FreeCAD by going to the data tab. You can see here I have the size option. Let's use a 90 millimeters for this knob. Now let's go back to attachment offset and modify the values a little bit lower. Now the text looks okay. Let's use this for a pocket. Since I've created the shape string in the draft workbench, it means I have to go to part design workbench, go back to the model, select the shape string and create a pocket. Again, I'm going to use 1.5 millimeters, press on the OK button. And now let's take a closer look. Everything looks exactly as I want. One thing that I'm going to change, and it's not really necessary, but I think it's very useful. Instead of the default name, the shape string, select it from the tree, press F2, and let's say here number. Now let's repeat this for the street name, which I will position here at the bottom of the plate. But what if you want to align these objects? You don't have such an option. How do you do it? Click on this button, which is the measure tool. Select the distance mode. Now zoom in and select the farthest to the right point of the top text. Now zoom in and select one of the points to the right in the lower text. And you can see the measurements here, the distance between these 2 points. I don't really care for the Y and the Z values. What I need to remember is this value, the delta X, which is 9.86 millimeters. I can now close the measure tool and select the street name object, go to position X, and instead of 70 millimeters, write 70 plus 9.86 millimeters, press enter. And now you can see they are perfectly aligned to the right. The sign is almost ready. I still need to do something to make the 2 holes, which will help me fit it to the surface, one on the left and one on the right. What I don't like is that this space is a little bit too small, and now I'm going to show you the real power of FreeCAD, the thing that I like most about FreeCAD. Let's move this a little bit to the left and also reduce the size of the slot. Let's go to the first pocket. Double click on the sketch, and now let's change this value. Zoom in the 15 millimeters. I will use a value of 30 millimeters. And now let's also reduce the overall size. Double click on the 420 millimeters and let's use a value of 390. So the space on the left and the space on the right are equal. Close the sketch. I need to do one more thing. Move these 2 texts to the left. First, let's go to number, go to the attachment offset position and X value, and right here minus 15 millimeters. Let's do the same for the second pocket for the street name, minus 15 millimeters, press enter. And now I have the sign modified. I have space for the 2 holes with just a couple of clicks and changing some values. Now let's create another sketch to define the 2 holes. Select the face, click on the new sketch button, zoom in and select the create circle button. Click somewhere, drag the mouse to have a circle, zoom out, zoom in on the other side, click again, and now I have the 2 circles. First, let's select the right circle, the left circle, set a diameter for these two circles, go here, press on the little arrow, and I have constraint diameter, or I can press K, release it, then press the O key pretty quickly after the first key, and I will get the same. Let's set a diameter of 10 millimeters because this will be the size of the screws that I'm going to use. Click on the OK button. And you might wonder why the diameter is only on the right circle, because even though I've selected two circles, it didn't set the diameter for both of them. Instead, it only set the diameter for one of the circles and also created an equal constraint between the two circles. This way, if I want to modify anything, I only have to modify one value. The second constraint that I'm going to set is to make these two circles horizontal. Select their centers and press the H key, which will make sure these two centers of the circles will always be at the same height. I still need to set the distance between the two circles and the distance from the origin, both on the horizontal and on the vertical. Let's select their centers again. And now let's set a horizontal distance constraint either from the menu or by pressing the L key. And I'm going to use our value of 430 millimeters. Now let's space this one here. I know that the overall length is 450, so select the center of the first circle, press L. Since it's only 1 point, it will set the distance from the origin, and let's set a length of 10 millimeters. This way they will be equally spaced to the edges of the side. I want them to be exactly in the middle, so again select the center of the left circle, press I for a vertical distance constraint, and let's set a length of 90 millimeters, which is half. You can see now the circles are green, which means they are perfectly determined by values, by constraints. I can close the sketch, create a new pocket, change the type from dimension to through all, and now I don't need to have any value. It will cut all the object no matter how tall it is. Click on the OK button, and now I have the sign ready. I have the text, I have the center line, I have the holes for mounting it to the surface. So let's go to the CAM workbench and let's set everything up in order to mill it on the CNC. As you can see, almost all the toolbar items are grayed out. That is because we don't have a job. In order to create a job, I need a base for the job, which is going to be the body, the street plate that we have created in the first part of the video. Select it in the tree and then click on the job button. In this pop-up, you don't need to set almost anything, just make sure the object is checked. Click on the OK button and you will have on the left all the settings for the job. The default behavior in FreeCAD 1.0.1 is to extend the stock, as you can see, with 1 mm on all the sides. You can leave it like that if you don't need to change the origin, but if the origin is wrongly placed, in order to be able to select the corner of the object, because it has a rounded corner but the corner point is here, I will reduce the extension, the beginning of the extensions on X, Y, and Z. And now you can see that I have the exact stock starting from the edges of the object. I can then select the corner. I will select the top one because I have the origin here, and then click the Set Origin button. Now let's go back and set the origin at the bottom of the object. That's the way I create the GCode files, but you can create them any way that you want. Now that I've set the stock, I need to do two more things in the Job Edit dialog. First, go to the Tools tab, and here I will add the tool bits that I'm going to use. In my situation, I'm only going to use one tool bit, which is a 3.175 millimeters and mill a 1/8 of an inch. In order to do that, click on the Add button, and in the pop-up that appears, select the tool bit that you are going to use. As I've told you, a 3.175 end mill. If you don't find the tool bit here, click on the Cancel button, go to CAM, go to Toolbit Library Editor, and click on the Create Toolbit. The first thing that you're going to select is the shape. In my situation, end mill. Click on the Open button. And now let's give it a name. I'm going to name it 2 millimeters because I already have a 3.175. Then write end mill and click on the Save button. That's not all, because it has been created. You can see it here in the list. But if you double click on it, you will see that it has some default values for the end mill. The diameter is 5 millimeters, the shank is 3 millimeters. I definitely don't want to use those values, so let's change them. Let's set a diameter of 2.0 millimeters and the shank diameter of 3.175, again an eighth of an inch. Let's say I have such a tool bit. Click on the OK button and now close this dialog and go to the Add button again. Now I have the 2 millimeters end mill in the list. Now let's select the 3.175, click on Open. After that, select the tool controller default tool, which is useless. It's here just so the job can be created. And after that, I need to change 3 more things. The feed speed, both on horizontal, which is X and Y, the vertical, which is Z, and the spindle rotation speed. Let's use a horizontal feed speed of 1500 millimeters per minute. All the values are in millimeters per minute. Unless you have changed the system in FreeCAD, the default is metric, and the spindle speed of 18,000 RPM. Let's go to the last setting that we need to make in order to be able to export a GCode file and be able to use it in Universal GCode Sender. Let's go to the Output tab and set a post processor depending on the machine that you have selected from the list. I'm using a GRBL machine, so I will select the GRBL post processor. Let's also select an output file. Click on the 3 little dots. Give it a file name, street sign. Take care to write the extension, otherwise you will have an error. So street sign.gcode or whatever file type you're using. Click on the Save button. It won't be created, it won't be saved until we export the job. Now that I've set everything in the job edit dialog, everything that I need to change right now, I can click on the OK button and move on to creating the operations. For this small project, I will create 3 operations. One, to cut the faces of these letters and the slot for the line. They are all at the same depth, and this way I can only create 1 operation. So after carving the letters, I will mill these 2 holes and then I will cut the outline of the object. Let's first create the pocket operation to mill the letters. In order to do that, I need to select all the faces of the letters by holding the Ctrl key down. Depending on the text on the shapes that I'm milling, it might be time consuming. You might end up selecting wrong things. But for that, I have a macro which is really useful in such situations. Let me show you how it works. If you want to use it, you can find the download link in the description. It's totally free. Just go to the Patreon page and you will be able to download it for free. So let's select one of the faces, go to the macro, click on the select faces with the same height macro, and then click on the execute button. As you can see, instantly all the faces that are at the exact same height are now red, which means they are selected. I can go here and use the pocket shape button to create a new pocket operation to mill these shapes. Remember, if you want to use this macro and avoid selecting a lot of faces, go to my Patreon page. You have the link in the description. There you can download this very useful macro. Now let's create a pocket shape operation. Again, I have a dialog on the left. Let's set some things so everything works okay. If you're using several tool bits, go here to this field, to the tool controller field, and make sure the one that you want to use is properly selected. Let's change the pattern from zigzag to zigzag offset. Let's change the step over from 100 to 80%. I will also check the min travel option. This will reduce the time a lot. And now let's go to the depth tab and make sure the start depth, the final depth, and the step down are correct for whatever I want to do. In my situation, I can leave them just as they are, except the start depth, which is 1 millimeter higher than the thickness of the material. I don't like this, so let's change it. Any of the values that have this little icon, which is an expression icon on the right, cannot be modified by clicking on them. You can see I can select the value, but no matter what I type, nothing happens. I actually rotated the object. In order to be able to change this value, I have to click on the little icon, click on the clear button, and now I can go here and type the 3 millimeters value that I want. Now let's see the toolpath, the movement of the tool bit. Click on the apply button, wait a little bit, and now you can see all these green lines which represent the movement that the cutter head will make on the material in order to get this result. Double check that it doesn't go outside certain parts of the object. I think everything looks as it should, so I can click on the OK button and close the pocket shape operation. Let's move to the second step, which is milling these two holes. For that I'm going to use a Helix operation because I don't want to change the tool bit and use a 10mm tool bit just for these two holes. I want to use the exact same tool bit. The Helix operation is perfect for circular objects. Before clicking on the button, click somewhere else to have nothing selected, then select the job in the list, click on the Helix button, and let's make the settings. Let's go to base geometry. Here I have the two holes. It automatically detected the holes that I want to mill. If for a certain reason you don't want any of the holes because it will detect all the holes no matter the diameter or the depth, if you don't want to mill all the holes, just uncheck them in the list. Let's go back to operations, and I will only change one thing here, which is start from outside or inside. What is the difference? It's obvious by the name, but what is the real difference for this setting? If I start from the inside, most probably the hole won't have the exact diameter that I've set. That is because I will have a little bit of tool deflection when milling the remaining material on the outside. If I select the outside milling, the tool bit will have material on both sides when creating the outer diameter. This means that the hole will be the exact diameter. What is the downside of this setting? I will probably end up with a piece of material in the center which will fly around. This is especially valid for holes that are all the way through the material. So I will set the start from value as inside. This way I make sure I won't have any material left and I don't have a diameter that is critical here. It doesn't really matter if it's 9.95 millimeters. The bolts will go through without any problem. Click on the OK button to make sure the toolpath is correct. For this hole it is exactly as I want. Let's double check on this hole. Everything is okay. I can close the Helix operation and move on to the final operation, which is cutting the outline of the entire plate. To make that, again, I click somewhere else to make sure I have nothing selected, click on the job and use the profile button. I generally don't need to modify anything here, just make sure the cut side is on the outside, otherwise you will end up with the tool bit going on the inside of the object, which is something you really don't want. Click on the apply button to double check the toolpath. And here is something that I don't really like. It will plunge almost all the way in the material. Let's change that by going to the depth tab. First, let's change again the start depth from 4 millimeters to 3 millimeters. Now let's change the step down from 3.175 millimeters. Again, click on the expression editor and on the clear button. Now I can change it and I will use a step down of 1.5 millimeters. Let's click apply again to see the new toolpath. You can see I have a smaller layer for the first path and the second pass for removing all the material. That's all that I need to set in the profile operation. Click on the OK button and now I have in the operations group here in the left all the three operations in the order that I want them to be milled. I just need to do one more thing, export the job, then move to Universal GCode Sender and make the actual milling. In order to export the job, select it from the tree. Next to the new job button, you have another button which is post-process. Click on it and you will end up with a G-code here. Click on the OK button. Click on the save button with a file name that you have used. And that's all you need to do in FreeCAD. Now you will be able to make this sign with any text that you want in just a couple of minutes. But what if you want to change the text here, the letters? You will most probably have a problem. Let me show you how to quickly solve that in order to be able to modify any text in this file. Changing the number of letters, the shape of the letters will most probably end up with an error. Let me show you what I mean by clicking on the street name, scrolling down to the string, and let's remove the last 3 letters. Click somewhere else, and now you can see the pocket shape has an error. The toolpath hasn't been modified, everything is messed up. There's a reason for that. I don't have these 3 faces anymore. They are still there, they are still referenced in the pocket shape base operation. You would say that clicking on the pocket shape, going to base and modifying it works. Well, let me show you that it doesn't. You can see that nothing is here correctly set. Go to base geometry, you have nothing here, which is a problem. The only solution that works is deleting the pocket shape operation and creating it again. Well, it's not the only solution. Let me show you how to remove the base operation with the faces that don't exist anymore. Go to the data tab, scroll down to base under the path group, and here I have a list of faces. Click on the 3 little dots and then click on the clear button. Click on the OK button to close it. And now let's hit the refresh button. You can see the pocket shape now doesn't have any error, but it still doesn't mean anything because I don't have any base geometry. I've just removed it. Let's double click on it to go to the base geometry tab. You can now see that all the settings are back here. Let's go to the base geometry tab. Select one of the faces. Go to macro again. Use the recent macro, which is the same macro that I've used previously. And now all the faces are selected. I can click on the add button, click on apply, and now everything is back to normal. So remember, if you change something in the base geometry and some of the operations don't work anymore, you cannot edit them because when double clicking on them, you will have some errors. Select them, scroll in the data tab to the base, click on the 3 little dots, and then click on the clear button.